Like, it's another thing, but.
All right, well, it is 4 o'clock, so I'm gonna start letting people in.
Sure.
And then Leanna, can you take over that as we start letting people in?
Sure thing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. As we wait for a few more people to join us, I am going to put out our first set of polling questions. So please take a second and go through those, and then we will get started in just about a minute. I feel like by now I should have come up with some good like elevator background music for this part.
How many do we have left?
I think 3.
Wow.
Maybe for next week or the following week. Maybe the last one I'll have some big like, pizzazz soundtrack or something.
How do you vote? It's not letting me pick anything.
Is it not? Oh, because you're a
You're a host.
Oh.
That's right. Yes. I always think about that every week. I was like, wait a second. Okay. All right, so if you've just joined us, please go ahead and fill out those polls, polling questions, and we will get started in just another moment here. Well, I am going to get started. If you're just joining us, welcome. We are I think our 7th Waste Less Wednesday social. So thank you again for joining us. I will be our MC for today's event. My name is Bridget Gregory Trites, and I am the Senior Waste Reduction and Recycling Coordinator at the Johns Hopkins Homewood campus. If you're new, welcome. Just to give you a little bit of background on the series, each week we host a different sustainability professional to talk about a different topic related to waste. Our hosts will spend a few minutes talking about their topic, and then we will leave some room for discussion, to pose some questions, and just get groups' feedback and thoughts. Before we get into the thick of things, I want to just go through some housekeeping items. So please note that the event is being recorded. So if you do need to leave, we will share it within the next couple days. Please feel free to introduce yourself into the chat room. We want to make these events social as a way to, create community and education and inspiration to other people. So feel free to utilize the chat room, share, talk there, but also feel free to audibly talk during like the Q&A portion of this social. So feel free, you don't have to like raise your hand or anything, just be courteous, try not to talk over other people, but if you have something you want to say or have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask that then. And if you're having any technical issues, please feel free to directly message me, Bridget, in the chat box. And also just as a reminder, if you are putting something in the chat room, or we will kind of be keeping an eye on the chat room. So if there's anything that's being said, if you don't want to audibly say something, you can always put it in the chat room and we'll bring it up and ask the presenter or bring it up in the conversation as well. So I'm going to close the polls. Let's just see who we've got here today. So I've just shared all the polling results with everybody. So everybody's within a university, it looks like. And a good mix of people from throughout the country. And a lot of staff, a couple undergrad students. and good mix of composting at home, both, and university. So cool. Well, that takes me into introducing our presenter today. So today I'm with Pamela Beckvagni. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Cool. I wrote down the pronunciation and was like, oh, I gotta nail this. So Pamela is the Environmental and Sustainability Waste Management Coordinator at University of Massachusetts Lowell, a lifelong resident of New England with a passion for purpose. She's a change agent who has dedicated her career as a leader striving to make a difference in the world and working with the underdogs. I love it. Over 25 years of program leadership, implementation, and assessment in the areas of alternative education, vocational services, environmental and waste management, and higher education. Pamela is currently planning and coordinating a variety of recycling, composting, and trash programs university-wide. Outside of work, I love this, so I'm going to include it. Pamela enjoys spending time with her family, gardening, her pets, and being active. To date, she completed 3 full Ironman races, 2 marathons, and summited Mount Kilimanjaro. I am so impressed and so excited to have you with us today. Pamela is going to be presenting on composting, which I know is a topic a lot of people are interested. So please welcome Pamela. So please take over.
Thank you. I'm curious on the call, who else is from New England or the Northeast?
Anybody want to unmute themselves and mention?
I saw one other person was from the Northeast, Lisa. So Lisa can understand my accent. Everyone else? Here, New England accent. I'm not from New York. I am from Massachusetts. Whoops. Well, thank you, Bridget, and thanks everyone for joining. As she mentioned, I work at UMass Lowell. I've been there for 4 years, and prior to that, I was in career services and alternative education. I have a strong passion for teaching and definitely working with any type of underdog or underhuman. I just got back from last week of being backpacking with my little dog, 25-pound dog named Stella. We were out in the White Mountains and part of the Appalachian Trail, which was something I also did when I was 22 years ago. I hiked the Appalachian Trail. So I do love a sense of adventure. So I'm going to talk about home composting today. This is a picture that you're looking at right now. This is, we made a rooftop garden with a local community garden company called Mill City Grows. And basically what we did was we took milk cartons, and this is taken based off of what Fenway Park does with the Boston Red Sox. They took milk cartons and they lined them with these filters that are porous, and then put in all kinds of herbs and whatnot. And that actually yields food that we utilize for a community sharing project that we do annually. We have about 40 shares. And Mill City Grows, we have an on-site garden on our university with an agriculture center. So it's pretty cool, the things that we do, and we use it as a learning center. So sounds like many of you compost either at your school or you compost at home. I do compost at home, and you can see day 1, your compost could look like this. And on day 30, if it's done well and accurately, it might look like that. It's pretty exciting with the warm weather here, and maybe some of us have some extra time on our hands. It's a great opportunity to try composting. There's another way you can do it with indoor worm bins called vermicomposting. And there's a link down here, and I can share this presentation with folks if they want it. I'll share it. Bridget does have a copy of it. This is a video of the composting of what I do and wanted to share it with you. I do apologize for the wind in the background. Unfortunately, I had taped this on Easter Sunday because UMass did a project with the 5 other sister campuses, and we did some training and we did composting. So I made the video on Sunday, and I wasn't able to edit all the wind. So just bear with me on that. Hi there, my name is Pamela Beckvagni. I work at UMass Lowell in the Office of Sustainability, and right now you're in my kitchen, and I wanted to share with you one of the things I do to be sustainable in my life. As you can see here, I have a bunch of fresh vegetables. blueberries, strawberries, grapes, some fruit, some vegetables, some cucumbers, a salad. And what I did was prepare all this morning. I washed everything first because you always want to get the chemicals off of the food. And unfortunately, what comes from that is a lot of food waste. Now, many folks don't know what to do with that food waste, and innately we throw it into the trash. The challenge with that is that the leftovers or any food waste that we have from our homes can be anywhere from 20 to 50% contributing into what goes into our municipal waste stream. Now, there is a solution for that, and there's a real powerful thing we can do with that called composting. Now, composting isn't only a fertilizer, it's a great way to reduce waste that goes into our landfills and waste streams. In fact, here's all of what was remaining from the food prep that I did today. That's a lot of food waste. All of the things you see here are actually compostable and can be put into compost. I did share that a potato, which I haven't prepared, but a potato or potato skin is compostable. You also have onions. Anything to do with an onion is compostable. Coffee grounds, you can certainly put coffee grounds right into your compost. And this is how I compost. We have a food-friendly container. You don't want to use one that's not food-friendly typically. And you just pop it in there, rinse this out. Another thing I do is just take all the compost and just dump it right in there. If you have eggshells, you just want to crunch them up and pop them in there. Now, if you're doing home composting for your garden, maybe you just only want to put food in there. If you're doing that, you want to avoid putting fish, meat, bones, cheese, and dairy products, and especially grease, anything greasy, because that will attract animals and it's harder to decompose. So you don't want to put meat. But if you're doing it in a general compost where someone's picking it up, then you certainly could follow whatever that municipality shows, and typically they will take food that includes meat and whatnot. Napkins can go into compost. You want to avoid any paper towels that you're wiping down chemicals or anything, especially when we're trying to be safe and wipe down our kitchens. Now, in terms of all the packaging that came, unfortunately I didn't buy locally today, and this all came with packaging. None of this is recyclable in your curbside recycling, so you want to make sure that this does go into the trash. If you have any questions, just check out the Office of Sustainability at UMass Lowell, and we'll be happy to answer them. Hi, this is Pamela. I'm now at Briscoe Farm in Dracut, Mass, and this is where I bring my compost. Introduce you to Jay Briscoe. He is the proud father of over 200 chickens. Hey, Jay.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
All right, more compost for me today?
You got it.
Nice.
What's yours got in your hand?
Oh, this is our friendly little chicken. She likes to be held. Yep. We don't name them, but this chicken number 200.
Chicken number 200. So tell us, Jay, what do you do with our compost?
Well, we take your kitchen waste, which is your compost from your average home, and then what we do is we mix it with our chicken manure or our chicken waste, and we mix it with some of our leaves so we get her off the farm, and also the shavings from the chicken coop as well. We mix it all together, and we try to do about 50-50, and we get a nice fertilizer from it, which we put out in the chicken, that we put out in the garden.
Right.
So we do organic gardening.
Let's go see. This is many of the 200 chickens.
You want to see them come out of the cracks? Watch this.
Here they come. They're coming out of the cracks. I see them. Chickens! Hi, chickens! Woohoo!
Come on, chicken.
Come on, guys! Oh, funny.
Come on, chickens.
Come on, chickens! Woohoo!
Compost pile. We're not doing much with it right now because we can't create too much heat. But we take it down and we pile it up here on the left, and we mix that with our chicken manure and our kitchen waste. And then what we do is we'll keep turning that, and we'll start turning that this upcoming May. And we'll add a giant pile of leaves that we've been collecting over there, and we'll mix them together 50-50, and what we do is we get a really nice organic fertilizer, and that's what that pile is. So last year, that pile on the right was actually 4 times the size of it, and when it breaks down, it turns into a lot of nitrogen and good organic matter, and we add that to the garden. With the compost that you get from the kitchen, and we get several people to come by and drop off their 5-gallon buckets, which we provide, and then you just take the compost, which is coffee grinds, and obviously it looks like sweet peppers here and stuff. We dump it on the compost pile, and we wash out the bucket, and we put it back out front again. But great things like coffee grinds, like this, and all the other stuff is great organic matter. And you get this great looking compost that doesn't have any more sawdust in it, doesn't have any more veggies in it, doesn't have any weed seeds in it, and it has a high calcium and nitrogen and other great things for the garden.
Yeah, I noticed you use cardboard. Is that to keep the weed barriers? It's a natural weed barrier? We did that at UMass Lowell too.
We did that last year, and we had gotten cardboard from a glass company, and you always want to get cardboard that doesn't have, it's less than 15% ink on it, so it's, nothing heavily printed on it.
Or tape,
and,
ideally
tape's
stickers.
a pain, but you can pick it up once it starts to break down. You can pull the tape off. You try not to let the staples roaming around the yard, just for own personal safety thing. We walk barefoot, but yeah, we just pull the staples out and we throw it out there, and we were using that to keep the weeds at bay. Chewed up what's called leaf mulch is great. It's really common. A lot of people like that. If you have a lot of leaves from your yard, you just chew that up with the lawnmower, run the lawnmower over it, and then use that, and then sprinkle that in on top of your soils. Acts as worm food as well as keeping the weeds at bay. Chewing it up is best. If it's whole leaves, they have a tendency to blow away. A lot of people will use wood chips, but you want to age the wood chips at least a year. Once they start to break down, if you age wood chips, if you put in fresh wood chips like you just got them and then you chew them up and put them in the garden, you'll lock up the nitrogen in the soil and your plants just won't thrive. So you get chips this year, like last year we get a big pile of chips, and then we'll use it this year.
Look how successful our celery, our squash, our grapes, our blueberries. So I collect this with my spouse, my wife, every week, and we bring this to Jay. It brings me great joy. I love these girls. Jay's great, and his family's great. If you're ever looking to buy some fresh produce, some honey, come on down. Want to promote?
Yeah, middle of May. Middle of May, we should be starting to open with some greens. We'll have some lettuces and radishes and things like that. And then as June progresses, and the season continues on, we're going to have a lot more stuff available. Corn and all kinds of squashes and that kind of thing. You name it.
This is Jay Briscoe. He's in Drake, Mass. on Nashville Road.
Nashville Road, yeah.
Thanks again, everybody. Oh boy. All right, can folks hear me?
Yes.
All right. So that farm is a farm that I drive by on my way to work every day. And so I get to drop this stuff off weekly and get to see all the girls. I never composted before. I don't have a garden or anything at this time. And basically just learned about the chickens driving to work one day and relaxing and finding them just so entertaining. I have a love of chickens, and met Farmer Jay, and he was telling me about the composting and gave me that container, and that's the rest of history. I've been doing this for, I think, about 3 years now. So he's a great guy, and I learned a lot. So as we mentioned in the video, why compost? It's important. It does prevent greenhouse gas emissions. When food's put into waste, municipal waste, it generates a lot of gases that have greenhouse gas emissions and can be very troublesome, as we know. We're able to recycle nutrients and reduce the use of artificial fertilizers, and it really does improve the soil quality. And you get to conserve water. And as I mentioned before, about 25 to even 50% of the food that we throw away into the garbage is food and garden waste that could be composted. We talked about, Jay mentioned using mulch. That's important. Or the wood, if you will, is that you want to let it dry out for a season. And what can you compost? Pretty much everything that we mentioned: grass clippings, weeds, tea leaves, coffee grounds, eggshells, old potting mix, dead flowers, and even animal and human hair will break down. If folks have newspapers, you can throw newspapers in. Although not too many newspapers exist anymore. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to put meat or dairy products in until you are very skilled at that. Or if your municipalities do pick up compost, which some do now, you want to check with them with what they will and won't accept. It's important that you pick the site. As Jay mentioned, in New England, it's really tough to compost out here because we don't get temperatures that are hot enough, except we have this week. But in general, it takes quite a while to get it hot enough to get compost. So you want to have a site that has good drainage and is summer, but there's some shade as well. And he mentioned talking about the nitrogen that comes out of the organic waste or the food matter. And he mentioned carbon-rich brown garden vegetation, such as dry leaves, wood, twigs, paper, and straw. And he mentioned mixing that to about 50-50. Putting some water in there helps. And then even adding some soil or completed compost, which introduces the compost microorganisms. You'd want to do it in layers. So here in this slide, it shows layering. And you want to start with a thick layer of twigs or coarse mulch at the base, so there's some drainage. And then you're just going to repeat with a thin layer of kitchen scraps, green garden vegetation, cover it with brown again, and then moisten, and you repeat. That's important. And one of the hints here is sprinkling soil or finished compost on top of the food scraps, which will make the compost richer, and it does reduce odor. You want to add air to the compost so it doesn't smell, and you want to turn it. At some local stores, they have these tools that you can stick in the compost and turn it. But you could also use a garden fork or place garden stakes or pipes in the heat, and that will allow the air to release. And you want to make sure it does not get saturated. That makes it really difficult for the compost process to work. In terms of tips for home composting, the top right picture is vermicomposting, which is using worms. One of the slides at the end was a picture of Farmer Jay with a bin, and he explained the whole process. He bought this whole setup where the worms will defecate, and it helps break down the soil, and he also feeds the worms. But worms really do help with composting. And it is important if you have grass clippings, which will help add the necessary nitrogen to a compost pile. But again, you always want to mix it and do the 50-50 with the brown matter. Both are necessary if you want to have quicker decomposition. I don't know if you've ever done piles of just grass. I used to, and it just smelled. It got really slippery and wet, and it took forever to break down. You don't want to compost fats, pet droppings, or animal products. They will attract pests to your pile, and they can spread disease. As we mentioned, newspaper or plain white paper from the computer is excellent for composting. You want to shred it first. A lot of folks don't know that shred paper is not compostable. The reason that it's not recyclable, is that it's too small. Anything smaller than 2 inches and 3-dimensional is not recyclable. And so I work at UMass Lowell, and we do a lot of collection of shred paper, and folks are appalled when they find out you can't recycle it unless it goes to one commodity like a shred company that takes all the shred paper itself. So if you do have a home shredder at home and you're not sure what to do with that paper, certainly don't put it in a bag and put it in your recycle bin. You can use it to start fires if you have a backyard fire pit, or you can spread the paper out into a compost pile. It's a great resource to utilize. And then when you're done with it, it should look something like the bottom picture or what Farmer Jay had, where you could just run it through your hands, and it was just lovely, rich, thick dirt. And a great thing about coffee grounds is worms love it. If you're going to add ashes to your compost, do so sparingly. They're very high in alkaline and they can affect the pH of your pile. In contradiction, you don't want to put a lot of pine needles or oak leaves because they're high in acidic. They're acidic. The other thing you really want to avoid is plants that have been treated with pesticides or herbicides, such as weeds and lawn clippings. When in doubt, much like recycling, throw it out. That can do more harm to your compost than good. Purchase a kitchen pail or crock. There's no need to keep running out to the pile after every meal. The container on the right is very similar to the one that I mentioned. It's food friendly. Sometimes if you get like a Home Depot container or a Lowe's container, it might leach out a certain chemical out of the plastic container versus utilizing one that's food friendly and they don't leach that plastic. We talked about the balanced diet of nitrogen coming from green and the carbon coming from brown. You want equal. And then if you have algae or seaweed, some folks may have that. It makes excellent additions to your compost pile. You just want to make sure you want to rinse off the salts before you put those in there. And then your finished compost is usually less than half the volume. As Farmer Jay mentioned, his pile was 4 times larger than the size that you saw when it was all said and done. While it's smaller, it's very dense and rich in nutrients. And the more you add to your pile at one time, the more it will heat up. So in other words, one supersized meal is better than several smaller snacks. I think that's a great analogy. You can keep your compost in a black plastic bin and in direct sunlight. And that will continue your process throughout the winter. A lot of times you can buy these at farm stores. I have one that I bought online and you can turn it and spin it. You can also use hail bales that will further insulate your compost pile. Here's a great example of repurposing on the right side where someone has utilized pallets to start their compost pile. This keeps out pests. It explains that you can drive 2 metal stakes into each side and then slide the pallets over each support. And then the person that built this has a metal fence in front of it just to keep it inside, the contents inside, and to keep the pests from coming in. Obviously, smaller pests could get in there, but rabbits aren't going to be able to get in there very easily. And as I mentioned, straw is a great source of carbon for your compost pile. You just want to be careful because straw does have a lot of seeds in it. And you want to make sure your pile is cooking. And that's really what's happening with decomposting and breaking down, is that it's cooking. And if you do end up having worms in there, the ideal temperature is about 55 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. In a relatively compact worm setup, it can be kept in a basement or an insulated garage, even under your kitchen sink, which is quite warm. Farmer Jay had his in the basement, and it was really warm where he had it. If you've got a smelly compost pile, there's ways to address that. You might have too much water in there, and that can be a problem. If you have too much nitrogens, like we mentioned earlier, grass clippings, that can become anaerobic, which has no oxygen, and then it really gets smelly. And you just want to take a pitchfork and break up the clumps and mix it up with carbon matter, such as dry leaves or shredded paper. And then you might have put fish in there, eggs in there, dairy or grease. That will certainly make a smell on its own. You want to try to remove those items and then cover it with brown material until it breaks down. Does anyone have any questions about this? Hopefully it came off as kind of an easy process.
So I have a question about the your relationship with the farmer, because personally I have been looking for a way to compost. I live over an hour-and-a-half drive. I usually take the train to Baltimore, and so I don't usually take my compost when I'm training back and forth to Johns Hopkins. And where I live in an urban city in Delaware, and it's been so hard for me to find someone to take compost. And so I really want to know, I mean, Pamela, you came across, and I don't remember, Briscoe Farms,
Yes, good.
driving to, you know, buy them every day. Does this farmer, does he accept compost from other people?
Yep.
Okay. And like, does he like advertise this, or like, is it only people who purchase things from him know about this, or?
I don't think other folks know about it. I mentioned earlier I was trying to solicit my friend to do it. He's a grandfather and he brings his 2 small grandkids, and they love Farmer Jay. They love the goats, the turkeys, the little baby chickens, the girls. And I can't get him to compost. I'm like, Rich, it's so easy. Farmer Jay gives you the container. He rinses it out. I drop it off. I get to play with the chickens. Doesn't get any better than that. You know, I think, Bridget, it would take calling around to maybe a local farm to say, hey, do you guys compost, or do you have chickens? I mean, I think any farm with a chicken is gonna, I mean, you saw, he dumped my compost out and those chickens devoured it. Like, I don't know how it makes compost because the chickens ate it.
No.
I would point out, and Bridget, I looked, it's not helpful for you, but there are formal, or at least public compost collections that you can find through the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. So if anybody was on our Lunch and Learn with them, they have a map of the United States, and if you click on that, there's a couple that are locally within Baltimore, but every state. Now, I'm sure, Pamela, maybe not, but you could check the map, and it's very possible that your farmer is not on there, and that this is just a, hey, I'm here, pop by. So I think like that there's probably hundreds of opportunities out there that are not formally, advertised or promoted like the ones on the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. But I will point that out as an option. And that just made me think about, if you do have a farmer's market, that maybe that would be a good thing to do is, the Baltimore farmer's market, both the JFX and the Waverly market have a food scrap drop-off program. But if you're outside of the Baltimore area and you do go to a farmer's market, maybe that would be a good question to ask each of the farmers as you go around to the different stands is, do you accept food scraps?
And then make sure like Farmer Jay doesn't like when we drop off fruit. So we can cut it in really, really small pieces. But you ask the farmer also, what will they collect? They may take things that you have or not have. And then tell your friends.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point about the fruit, because somebody had actually asked while you were giving your presentation about, was it acidic fruit?
Yeah.
Citrus fruit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So
he'll take blueberries and like the heads of strawberries and grapes, but he'll take a few limes. Like he joked one day and he's like, oh, someone had margaritas over the weekend. And I was like, no, actually Mick Ultra with lime, but he'll take it a little bit, but he doesn't want a lot of it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Allison, did I answer your question? You asked about online resources. So I would start with.
I think that was helpful. Hold on. Here I am.
Hi, Allison.
I do think that was helpful. And as we were sitting here, I was just realizing, oh my gosh, my daughter actually works at a camp that has a farm. Now, unfortunately, they had to get rid of a lot of their animals because of the crises. So they had to sell many of their animals. Well, I don't know if they're really in need of any, but they probably know other people in the vicinity who might actually be collecting compost. So I'll ask that as well.
You might check, we have an animal shelter here in Methuen that takes farm animals, and given this crisis, places like that are really struggling for food for their animals. And if they have farm animals, these donations might actually help, this nonprofit animal shelter, because they've got horses and chickens, and so many people have had to give up their animals, or I just recently heard our local Audubon's probably going to go under, and they've got a whole bunch of reptiles and birds, and I'm not sure what's going to happen to those. So that might be another resource, is just local nonprofits that have animals.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I'll look into that.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, you know, and in all of our Waste Less Wednesdays, there's usually some COVID component. I mean, how can we avoid it, right? And in a lot of situations, you know, like last week we talked about food waste. It's like, actually, because of COVID, I'm wasting less food, but I don't have as many places to compost. Or, you know, so there seem to be a lot of far more downsides and negatives to this pandemic. However, some of the silver linings, you know, or some of the opportunities that may have cropped up that were not necessarily opportunities prior to this. So I think, you know, you raise a good point that that people, you know, who may have had a steady source of food scraps may no longer have it. And so you could possibly find those informal connections. Can you think of anyone? Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, just to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying, Leanna, you know, I know oftentimes university dining halls or restaurants already have relationships with farmers, especially if they already do like farm to farm or farm to fork type food offer that in their restaurant. You know, they already have these relationships where they give their food scraps. And so a lot of these places that aren't currently operating aren't providing food scraps. So there actually probably is an even greater need for food scraps at these traditional farms. So I think I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We used to, UMass Lowell, we have about 475 tons of composting that goes out of our dining halls. We have 18,000 students, or we did as of last year. I'm not sure what we have in August.
Yeah.
Hopefully somewhere close. But we had just had so much compost that we couldn't give it to the pig farmer anymore. So it went to grind to energy, and then we have it going to a grind to energy. We have a couple of those on campus, and now it's all going to anaerobic digestion.
Patty from Towson University is asking if you've ever taken your students to the farm, maybe the pig farm or the chicken farm.
So I've never seen the pig farm. I'm just very fond of my chickens, the girls. I'd go to the pig farm. I'm not opposed to pigs. I have 19, well, as of last semester, I had 19 students working on our operations team doing different sustainability initiatives. That'd be a great field trip. I'd probably be the most excited one there. As you can tell, this is real. I'm not acting. This is pretty much how I am with my enthusiasm. But that'd be a great field trip to show them, you know, just a different sense of composting. But they've all seen this video, so.
Yeah, we have not done many tours lately, but there was a period of time where we did a couple of different tours. We started out at the incinerator and to sort of show where things went when we didn't reduce or divert our waste. And then we took a group to our recycling facility, our MRF.
Yes.
And then we took a group to our composting facility. And the challenge is that they're so far from campus. Unfortunately, in Baltimore, we just don't have a lot of opportunities, or we don't have a lot of businesses or places that we are taking our commercial waste for recycling and composting. So it was a limiting factor, was like having students that could dedicate the time to leave campus and pack into a 15-passenger van and drive an hour. But I think it's very impactful. And so the next best thing, I guess, is video.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think just the crux of all of this is reduce. You know, like buy less, buy what I need. I'll speak for myself. You know, I wish I didn't have as much compost as I do, but I ate a ton of vegetables. I haven't eaten red meat since I was 19 and I'm 52 now. So, I mean, there are ways to make changes. I sadly do eat the girls' cousins. I broke my my meat sobriety, and when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, I hiked into town and I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken, and it was like a crime scene. I ate chicken. I feel so bad if there's vegetarians. I was a strict vegetarian for 19 years, and I never went back. I still eat chickens, and I feel so bad. I really do. I'm gonna be better. But that's the key is, so many of us, it goes bad in the refrigerator and we don't mean to. But that, that'd be my tip, reduce.
Heather, who's from Hopkins, says, what keeps compost used as mulch from turning into a growing medium for all the weeds in the garden?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. Does anyone have an answer? This is a panel of experts, all of us.
I guess I'm a little, go ahead, Heather. I see you popped up. No, you're not unmuting?
Can you clarify what you mean?
Yeah.
Well, so compost is great to mix into your garden soil. It helps your flowers grow. What keeps it from, if you're laying it on top, what keeps the weeds from just growing in that? I mean, it's like if you put down wood mulch, they don't have any place to get into the dirt to root. But it seems with compost on top that's great stuff for them to root in.
It is. You got to weed first, I think.
And are you talking about finished compost on adding that?
Yeah, I thought in the presentation there was mention of using it as mulch.
So when I talked about the cardboard a little bit earlier, that's a great way to, it's not organic. You want to take the tape off and the staples and whatnot, but you're not using, pesticide or anything, is laying down cardboard when you're gardening or anything, and then putting the compost on top of that. And the cardboard will eventually biodegrade, and hopefully the weeds never germinated because they've been in the dark for so long, but how resistant those little rascals can be. I don't know scientifically, or you're absolutely right. It probably would make the weeds even happier to compost using them as mulch.
It really
I top dress my beds with compost, and it does. I mean, the weeds do grow through it. In some ways, it suppresses if you put a thick enough layer. But the weeds do come up through it. You just have to hand pull them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that if you're backyard composting, you just want to make sure, like that's, what they call cold composting, where you don't necessarily get those temperatures up as high as you would in a really hot composting or more of a commercial or larger farm entity. So you just have, once you reach like 125 or 140, I can't remember exactly what it is, then those seeds die. So at least you're not adding seeds from your compost, so you're not, gonna have.
Yeah, I don't put any weeds in my compost, but I do get a lot of volunteer tomato plants at my compost. I have a whole section of little replanted volunteer tomato plants. I never buy tomato plants. I just they're mostly cherry tomatoes.
Yeah, so that's probably because the temperature isn't killing off the seeds in your compost pile. Yep.
Right.
Just lost my light.
I mean, it does get pretty hot, but I've never measured it with a thermometer. I have pet rabbits, and I use wood stove pellets and paper bedding in their litter boxes, and I dump all that in compost. And I have some in the winter, when my composting slows down, I have some local farmers that come and pick up my extra rabbit waste.
Go Kathleen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually run a rabbit rescue, so I have a lot of rabbit waste.
That's great.
Awesome.
Pamela, could you, if you can think of, from personal experience or not, well, you said you don't backyard compost, but through the work that you've, been doing and looking into composting, can you, or maybe collecting at your house before you take it to the farm, can you share any common mistakes or some lessons learned that you might share with folks if they are doing it at home and they've just given up because it's gone awry?
Let me grab my bowl. I'll show you. So when I first made the video, I showed you that I had the bucket in the kitchen, and that was, to be honest, a pain in the rear end, because you had to keep running to the, I said, you don't want to keep running to the pile, but I was that person, and now I'm reformed. Now I have this lovely bowl that I have right in the kitchen. It has a lid on it, and it even has coffee grounds and a banana in it. I did not stage this for you all. And this sits there all day, and then at the end of the night, after we've done our dishes and had dinner, we clean this out, and it goes right in the bucket, and it's nice and clean. So, because it was skeeving me out, like I don't want flies in my house, and I think some folks might have an opposition to smell and whatnot, but we keep it right in the garage. We put the lid on it. There's no flies. There's no smell, and that can be a pain. And because I don't go to work right now, I'm working remote. I have to kind of go out of my way to drop the chicken stuff off, but I'm committed to it. I think, it's not hard, and it's a change of behavior. It's definitely a little bit of extra work, but to me, it's the joy of seeing the girls.
No, I love that. And you bring up some good points as you're kind of showing, changes that you've made. So one of my questions then is, do you feel like the waste that you're putting in the trash bin is reduced because you're diverting what you're putting into the compost, and I'm assuming you recycle?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That can I think it's a 5-gallon, it's like a Home Depot bucket, the 5-gallon buckets, easily one a week. And that's heavy, where, municipalities are getting charged by weight. And then, even if it goes to an incinerator, which almost everything now is because landfills are capped, you're burning that. So, this is not separated from municipal waste. It's not going into recycling. Food should never go into recycling. So absolutely. You figure a 5-gallon drum that's not getting put into the landfill every week. And I'm just, I'm a pretty conservative person with food. I don't waste a lot, and whatnot. So we're a family of 2, and our daughter lives with us right now until next week. And even she's composting now. So absolutely, it's diverting from the landfill.
I would like to know if, because, when you throw things into the trash and you're not really seeing them over time add up, or you're not taking it from a bowl and putting it into a bucket, once you start separating out that food, did it change any of your food waste habits? Did you start noticing things that were getting wasted, and you were able to then change that, make a reduction sort of in your behavior upstream?
I'm cognizant of it. My whole life I've been very attentive to waste and recycling and very passionate about that stuff. But you do see waste. Like the other night, I had no idea that there was shrimp that we got wasted, and I had made a little pizza, and I was like, I didn't know it was in the refrigerator. So yeah, it's really being attentive. And even when you think you're doing your best, you're like, so I'm the family food shopper right now, and I go every Wednesday, and I always do an inventory. We make sure we do an inventory of what's in the refrigerator first before we just randomly go shop. Because, we don't need any more celery. We have it, but we didn't used to pay attention to that as much. So I am more attentive to that. And, I wasn't the food shopper, and now I know how expensive everything is. So I was like, geesh. I know we're running out of time, but I know folks might need to leave, but I just want to end with a joke if I could. Because I know I've come off very serious, and this has been very boring, and I apologize. So what do you call a pessimistic trash can?
I don't know.
Margaret, I'm going to ask you, because I love your picture I have a similar picture of myself doing that, holding the recycled containers. Margaret, what do you call a pessimistic trash can?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I was just asking my husband for
You can't phone a friend, Margaret.
a sad bin.
A sad bin?
I don't know. I don't know.
Liz, you have a guess? You're on mute, Liz. Colleen?
It's the Socratic method.
All right. Well, does anyone want to make a guess before I tell you? And you have to tell the joke to at least one person tonight.
How
It's a-
about down in the dump?
Yeah, ooh, that's a good one, Lisa. It's trash can't.
Ooh.
Repeat the first part.
What do you call a negative trash can? A
Oh,
trash can. Or
I like
pessimistic.
that.
Pessimistic trash can is a trash can't. So let's all be a compost, recycle, reduce can people. We
Oh,
can
right. I'm going to use that for my 9-year-old as soon as we get off this call.
nice. Try with like someone older and see if they get it. It can be tricky.
That's a great as my husband would call it, his dad jokes. His really
Yes.
jokes. Love it. Well, thank you, Pamela, so much for joining us this evening. I'm a little worried that I'm gonna be cut off here because a major storm is coming through my area. So we will wrap it up here, but thank you, Pamela, and
Thanks, everyone.
I will follow up this session tomorrow, probably Friday, with the recording, and I'll try to get the Pamela's presentation to include in that as well, and I'll put a link to her video, and I will also mention, oh, thank you, Leanna. Before you jump off, if you could finish putting in the polling information, just so we have some information on how you thought today's session went. And then let me put a quick plug out for our presentation next Wednesday. So next Wednesday, we will be joined by Kayla Hickman from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And she's going to be talking about National Sword and all of the effects that National Sword has had on the recycling industry, particularly. We'll be kind of focused on university and institution-wise effects. But we'll also talk about, municipality and at home too. So we're really excited to have you guys join us then. And as always, if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, have a great rest of your Wednesday.
And in honor of COVID, everyone give yourself a self high five. Good
Oh, I
job.
love it.
Self high five.
Thank you, Pamela. It was wonderful to have you join us this week.
Thanks, Leanna. Bye, Bridget. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.